People are always free to stand up for their own conscience, period. And they're going to suffer the consequences. So Bahaullah stood up for his conscience, and he was banished in prison for 40 years. Abdulbaha stood up, and he was jailed by the current government and system that was there. And the Bab stood up for his conscience, and he was shot with 750 rifle rounds. Bahais are not afraid of death. Abdulbaha said that the Bab and Bahaullah didn't run away, and he wouldn't run away, and he stayed in the Holy Land, and he could have left there, and he endured many trials and tribulations. In the Baha'i community, if we're firm in the covenant, we're going to stand up for our beliefs. Abdulbaha says, through the contrast of differing opinions or points of view, the spark of truth will come forward. Conflict and strife are forbidden, a rigid prohibition in the book, but we have differences of viewpoints and opinions, and we can stand up for these. If we're given a command to do something and we feel that that's against, would mean that we would be going against God, the way we understand that in our conscience, then of course the Baha'is should not blindly obey anybody or anything in this way. We spoke of what firmness in the covenant means last time. About this, that if the House of Justice or the Guardian commanded us to chop off our wife's head, we'd say no as a favor to the Guardian and the House of Justice because we're firm in the covenant. So no, that the Baha'i people at no time should give up their personal sovereignty to simply blindly obey wrong commands. They have to know what the priorities are. The first priority is staying firm in the covenant of the will and testament of Abdulbaha, which means the priority of the divine names: love, justice, concord, fidelity, harmony. If we're asked to do something and we see that it's bereft of the presence of God, we're not going to do it. And if the House of Justice would threaten to execute us or imprison us or take away our voting rights, we'll let them. You know, that we're going to stand right with God. So we have to have that understanding in and of ourselves. If we're spiritual and we're mature and we're standing right with God, we're going to find out that this is a school and that the school is giving us an education. And in this case, some of these things are tests that we're being tested upon. So the individual has to have not objective faith or subjective faith, but discerning faith. They have to discern what is happening in the cause at the time at which it's happening. The guardians of the Bahai Faith are restricted to the presidency of the House of Justice. The same way the president of the United States here is Joe Biden. He's not allowed in my house. He can't come to my city and arrest people. He doesn't have the authority to do that. He has an executive function at the federal level. They have local police and stuff like this. So these guardians are equal human beings and citizens with equal rights, just like everybody else. We're not allowed to infringe upon their personality and their personal rights, and they're not allowed to infringe upon our personality and our personal rights and freedoms. We have a free and open society, which we should respect the personal reality of all the people equally. In the government of the Bahai Faith, as the executive branch of the House of Justice, the guardianship is restricted to those administrative roles. In other words, we're all equal as free people to live our lives freely. And it's possible the guardians might refuse to carry out a decision of the House of Justice if they feel it's unethical or immoral, and then there'll be tensions there. And the guardians could wind up getting jailed by the House of Justice, possibly. Who knows? Abdulbaha was jailed by the government that was there during his time in the Ottoman Empire, and Bahaullah and Abdulbaha were jailed by the powers that be. So what's important is that the cause of God moves forward, and all of us have a franchise to teach. The Guardian has a personal teaching effort, and so does everybody else. And then the House of Justice and the administration has an official teaching effort also. And hopefully all of this will combine together in perfect harmony. For those that separated themselves from the Holy Family and are now no longer members of it, because they're not connected to it at all, we understand under the covenant, we have the chosen successors of the covenant and the appointed successors of the covenant, and they're equal. The chosen successors accept the appointed successor. And when they accept the appointed successor, they're just as equal a member of the Holy Family as the appointed successor who's inherited the throne of David from the line of Ogson. And each generation forms its houses of justice, locally, nationally, and internationally, according to the covenant in administration as it applies to our day and age. And we have harmony here. For those people outside of the covenant, it's confusion, conflict and strife, fighting, and injustices and other problems. We don't have any of these problems in the kingdom inside the faith under the provisions of the covenant. These are all issues that people suffer when they come out from under the covenant. And the reason they're suffering is so they'll realize they're out from under the covenant. So if they come back under the covenant, all those problems will just go away, vanish, like summer destroys winter. All the problems of winter, where are we going to get warm, it's cold, it's dark, are vanished when summer's there, because now the sun's out and things are growing and the water's flowing and so forth and so on. So coming out from the winter of violation into the summer of the covenant in the summertime land, none of the problems of winter are in the summertime land. So this is the best guidance we can give people, is to become firm in the covenant. If they're Bahais, if they're human beings on the planet, they need to become firm in the 1928 covenant of international peace on earth. And like the Bahais, also be in favor of electing the Supreme Tribunal, a Council of the Nations that'll bring peace to the world and elect and have war no more. And we're all should be in favor of electing the Supreme Tribunal. The Bahais are in favor of it as a religious act. The rest of the people should be in favor of it because it's pragmatic and good for them. It doesn't have to be a religious act. But what makes a person a Bahai is forming the Supreme Tribunal is an act of religion. It's a spiritual act. It's a religious practice to build the temple of the people being living stones in it that will sit on the international tribunal. But for the rest of the people, it's a pragmatic act. If they don't understand the divine, deeper spiritual nature of it, it still might be a spiritual and religious act for them. But it definitely is for the Bahais, and the Bahais are the first who will obey the just government when it's set up, as they obey the just governments in the lands they live in, and are the first to willing to have their lives sacrificed for the establishment of peace on earth and justice for the people, as the cradle of the faith demonstrates with the 10,000 Babi martyrs and the 20,000 Bahai martyrs over a greater length of time. They sowed the seeds 100 years ago. Now we're ready to, reap the benefits of the fruit of this and bring this Supreme Tribunal into the realm of being, to come out of the realm of heedlessness when we're not forming it, and bring it into the realm of being to elect it. This is the most important thing of the next century, of the next decade that we have, of the next few years. The most important thing we can do is elect this Supreme Tribunal so that all the people of the world can remain firm in the 1928 Covenant of International Peace. That is the Baha'i covenant in the world. It's the same thing. The Baha'is don't make any difference between our covenant and the 1928 covenant. We're all in. And the functioning of this is to elect the Supreme Tribunal to enforce and uphold it. The formation and election of this Supreme Tribunal, which will be the glory of this century, the way the glory of the last century of spiritual civilization was making war outlawed, will be to elect the Supreme Tribunal, and it will be the greatest event in the next million years of human history. We're able to elect this international council at this time of maturity of the nations. A million years from now, civilization will look back at our generation today that elected this thing correctly, and it'll be seen as the greatest event in human history in this million years.